We are using full waveform inversion to actually image those fractures. So in the image that you're getting, you can actually see fractures in your image.
Hello, my name is Andrew Geary, and welcome to Seismic Sound Off, in-depth conversations in applied geophysics. I am joined in this episode by two of the lead editors for Full Waveform Inversion that appeared in Interpretation and The Leading Edge, Dr. Michal Malinowski and Jyoti Behura, respectively. Dr. Michal Malinowski is Associate Professor at the Institute of Geophysics at the Polish Academy of Sciences at Warsaw and head of the Seismic Imaging Team. Dr. Michal Malinowski discusses the special section in the November 2016 interpretation issue with me next.
So for those listeners that may need a brief refresher on full waveform inversion, in a few sentences, what is FWI?
Well, the shortest definition would be that FWI is a nonlinear data fitting technique that minimizes the misfit between observed and computed seismic data, and iteratively updates the subsurface model. The promise, of course, of FWI is that we can start building this subsurface model with raw seismic records with minimal processing applied, and that's why it's so appealing for the industry.
What excites you about FWI when you read these articles, and what is impressing you in the scholarship that you are reading about for this special section?
Well, I would say that, first of all, from these three papers, we see that FWI is a really mature technology today. And what's really surprising is that we can handle a massive 3D seismic data with this technology today. And massive here means that we can handle data sets that are thousands of square kilometers in size. So that's really impressive. And also as a researcher, I'm really glad that the industry is picking up on the concept of a multi-parameter full waveform inversion, and also that almost all contributions stress the importance of the inversion for the anisotropy parameters. So I think this is also a crucial point.
One of the most cost-effective solutions in interpretation is reducing the turnaround in the data processing. This is an area where FWI shows promise. How do the papers in the special section take steps to prove this promise?
Full waveform inversion cannot replace seismic imaging entirely, as it was originally postulated that ultimately it can, but at the moment we cannot replace the seismic imaging. But of course, it can significantly reduce the turnaround cycle of data imaging through the automatic building of the anisotropic model, for instance. But I think it's my personal opinion that it's not only the reduction of time between processing imaging and the interpretation which matters here, but even more importantly, this high resolution subsurface model that we obtain from FWI provide a wealth of quantitative information for seismic interpreters.
FWI is now a fairly widely established theory of geophysical imaging, yet has some limitations to be fully embraced. How do you see the papers in this special section addressing these limitations?
Originally, FWI was devised as a process linking velocity model building and imaging in a single step. However, a majority of the published FWI results focus on the model building step using diving waves and wide-angle reflections, skipping short spread reflections. One of the papers from this special section, paper by Cheng et al., shows how to effectively combine both parts of the wave field, so the diving waves and the reflections, in the FWI workflow, overcoming limits of the depth penetration of diving waves. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is related to the multi-parameter inversion and inverting for anisotropy. So similarly to the paper by Cheng et al., a paper by Goh et al. Shows that we can also effectively apply multi-parameter FWI and invert not only for velocity, but also for anisotropy parameters. And therefore, we are no longer dependent on the imager's tedious job of building the anisotropy model upfront before we are starting with our FWI project. And finally, looking at the paper by Xiao et al., I can safely state that the computational resources are no longer a problem for modern FWI algorithms. And it's, as I mentioned, it's nowadays possible to handle data sets like the one described in this particular paper, covering area of 25,000 square kilometers.
Did something surprise you as you worked on these three papers about FWI or the field that you didn't know before?
Well, first of all, this scale of this application on this offshore Gabon, that really surprised me because when comparing, for instance, with the very first results of a 3D FWI published in 2009 on a Valhall field, the scale is incomparable, and industry was excited, of course, by these first results, and now I think it's really impressive. And also, I think that the importance of anisotropy and inversion for anisotropic parameters, this is something that was stressed by the authors, and so far the typical conventional FWI workflow consists on keeping the anisotropic parameter fixed rather than inverting for them. So I'm also somehow pleasantly surprised that the current development is towards the really multi-parameter inversion, including the update of the anisotropic parameters.
So you had mentioned that some of the limitations, whether it be the computational limitations, are beginning to be addressed and almost not a factor anymore. You mentioned how you were pleasantly surprised of the direction of the multi-parameter inversions and using that. Where are you seeing the next advancements in this research?
Well, I think that the biggest and the sort of the holy grail really in the FWI is to try to combine these two modes, let's say the tomography mode and the migration mode of the FWI. So to include the reflections, because then we can, of course, we can penetrate deeper. We are no longer affected by our limited offset range. So I think the big change will be when we will have algorithms in which we can invert the reflected arrivals.
What do you hope readers take away from these three articles?
I think that the most important takeaway point is that the FWI technology is mature. We can obtain reliable velocity models, but more importantly, also the anisotropy models. And therefore, we can reduce the turnaround cycle of, let's say, data imaging, because we can feed back these anisotropic models into the imaging workflow. And also for interpreters, that they have now a tool. They can request such a tool to be applied on the data that can provide them with high resolution parameters of the subsurface, not only velocity, also other parameters, anisotropy, attenuation, which are, I think, invaluable for interpreting curves.
After this short break, I will speak with Jyoti Behura, founder and CEO of Seismic Science LLC, on the December 2016 and January 2017 special sections of The Leading Edge.
Hi, I'm Jean Virieux, and if you are enjoying this episode on full-waveform inversion, check out my article in the Encyclopedia of Exploration and Geophysics, available from the SEG Digital Library. The encyclopedia includes contributions of textbooks and tutorial-style articles on a wide range of topics in explorations and development geophysics. The latest article explores FWI, and we have done our best to make it understandable in spite of a well-known feeling that FWI is a difficult and sophisticated technology. This article can be downloaded for free at library.seg.org. We hope you find it useful.
You received a significant number of articles for this special section, leading to FWI full waveform inversion being featured in the December and January issues of The Leading Edge. What were some of the themes that were touched on in part 1 in December and part 2 in January?
We did receive a lot of manuscripts, papers both from the industry and academia. And the way we divided it was the first part was primarily devoted towards addressing advances in theory, methodology, algorithms. And then the second part was primarily devoted towards field data applications. With regards to the major theory methodologies that we saw in this first part of the special section, we saw some common themes. And the themes were, how do we address the issue of cycle skipping? We already know that full waveform inversion is a challenging problem because the problem is very nonlinear. And while you were solving this inverse problem, the solution can get trapped in something called a local minima, and it gives you a result that might not make sense. And so there were a number of papers that addressed this challenge. For example, a paper by Mao and co-authors who used warping, or to be more precise, dynamic warping to overcome this cycle skipping issue. And moreover, there was another paper by Metavier and co-authors who use an optimal transport distance strategy to address this cycle skipping issue. Another common theme that was seen in many of these papers is the use of reflection energy in addition to transmission energy. Traditionally, since the days of Gerhard Protz and his students, when they came up with practical solutions for waveform inversion, they were concentrating primarily on using the transmitted energy, the diving waves. But now we are going towards exploiting the reflection energy as well. Besides that, the reflection energy contain a lot more information as well. Also regarding the elastic properties of the subsurface. They give information about the higher wave numbers, so you can obtain a higher resolution image. And so you can see that there is a lot of emphasis in both academia as well as the industry towards inverting for the reflection energy.
What surprises you about what you are learning about FWI and where the science is going?
Traditionally, we have been looking at seismic images, right? So you look at a seismic image, you see there are some amplitudes, highs and lows, and then using that, you can, let's say, delineate structure or establish stratigraphy through interpretation. Full waveform inversion is going to give us an image of the subsurface at really high resolution with all the rock properties. So now we're going to replace this traditional conventional seismic image with peaks and troughs with a high resolution image of just the rock properties. And this new image, or rather these new images of rock properties, let's say, P wave impedance, shear wave impedance, density, or even other rock properties derived from these inverted rock properties, they will be directly used for interpretation. Not only for interpretation, such as picking structure, figuring out the stratigraphy, but also for directly finding about reservoir properties, about locating drilling hazards. And that's where I think we are headed. And that's where, I think, the most exciting aspect of full waveform inversion.
Are you surprised that FWI is getting that close to creating that high resolution image for interpretation and use?
I'm actually not surprised. Traditionally, microseismic imaging has been done to locate just hypercenters, dots in a box. And then those dots in a box are used as a proxy for hydraulic fractures. But we are using full waveform inversion to actually image those fractures. So in the image that you're getting, you can actually see fractures in your image. And so from our personal experience, I am not surprised. There are a lot of advancements being made on the theoretical side, algorithmic side, as well as on the application to field data sets. And every year you see new things coming about and more applications to field data sets being published.
Speaking of new things, a lot of the research and application of FWI has focused on acoustic FWI. In part 2 of this edition, Racknes and Artston discuss elastic FWI. Could you highlight a couple of the solutions they proposed in addressing this advancement?
I think you bring up a very relevant question here. Currently, most of the waveform inversion that is being done assumes an acoustic Earth, so the Earth as a fluid. And we all know that's not real. We live on land, and there's a lot of land underneath the oceans. So the Earth is elastic. This paper by Racknes and his co-author is extremely relevant. And in the future, that's where we need to go, is to address the reality of the Earth and use the full physics of the problem, use the full wave field in the seismic data. So use all the recorded data, which comprises not only of P waves, that is acoustic waves, but also shear waves. However, some of the challenges that are inherent in you doing elastic full waveform inversion is one, computational. It's extremely computationally intensive. Besides that, there are theoretical challenges as well, which arise from the fact that your model space is vastly increased. Now, suppose instead of just inverting for P wave velocity, you want to invert for shear wave velocity as well. The uncertainty, the ill-posedness of this problem increases. Some of the solutions that Racknes and his co-authors proposes using GPU-accelerated computing together with CPUs. Traditionally, we have been using just CPUs, that is central processing units, the main processors that exist in our computers, to do all the number crunching. However, with GPU accelerated computing, which is being pioneered by NVIDIA currently, what is done is a lot of the compute intensive tasks can be offloaded from the CPUs to the GPUs. And these GPUs each GPU can contain thousands of cores, contrast to a CPU that can contain, let's say, 8 cores or 16 cores or a few cores, far less cores than housed by a single GPU. And so if your code is parallelized, and nowadays almost all these codes are parallelized, so you can offload a lot of these compute-intensive tasks onto the GPU, which can really crunch these numbers at a really fast rate and resulting in a significant increase in the computational speed. However, I should mention that this solution is already being employed in the industry. Besides that, to overcome the multiple parameter issue, they proposed either using different parts of the data or using proper parameterization. So instead of parameterizing your problem, let's say in velocity, P wave velocity and shear wave velocity, maybe we should parameterize it in terms of impedances or some other parameterization. And I think further research needs to be done.
You sort of hint at it at the last part of that answer there. You know, would you consider full waveform inversion as it is now to be a practical application for the geophysicist?
I think very much so. Yeah, but before I answer that question in a little more detail, I think to make it more practical, to make even acoustic full waveform inversion more practical or elastic waveform inversion practical, one strategy could be to use blended sources or to use simultaneous sources. Simultaneous sources are already, simultaneous source acquisition is already being used in the industry, and it's becoming pretty popular now. A lot of research being done in BP, for example, and Exxon as well. So instead of firing one shot at a time, these companies are firing multiple shots using multiple source board, for example, or multiple vibrators. So you can really reduce your cost of acquisition that way. And you can use a similar strategy in inverting that data. And I think that should be one of the approaches when we are moving towards making full waveform inversion practical and, and widespread. So this is one of the solutions. But to make it practical, really practical and widespread, we need to address two things. We need to first address the challenges, and these challenges include theoretical challenges as well as practical challenges. So theoretical challenges will be like, how do we incorporate the full physics of the problem into our inversion? How do we use the full wave field? How do we invert for different parameters? For example, in elastic full waveform inversion. Practical challenges will include computational challenges. How do we make full waveform inversion fast? How do we reduce the computational cost? If we are able to do that, then that's one of the biggest bottlenecks right now is the expense of the full waveform inversion. But then to make it a widespread interpretation method, we have to demonstrate all these methodologies on field data first. And that's why I think this special section with theoretical development, algorithmic developments, as well as multiple field data examples is, I think, an important special section, because it's going to tell the reader that we are solving multiple issues, and we are not only solving them, we are able to apply them on field data and look at the results we are obtaining, these high resolution images of rock properties, from which you can use to locate your drilling targets, avoid drilling hazards, and characterize the reservoir accurately.
As we wrap up here, what do you hope the readers take away from the special section?
What I sincerely hope that the leading edge audience as well as the other audience takes from this special section is that full waveform inversion has a bright future. Full waveform inversion, we might end up with just one single tool, a tool that can yield a high resolution image, okay, which is very suitable for geological interpretation, like finding out structure in stratigraphy, but at the same time gives us rock properties and tells us about all properties of the subsurface. Right now, we are not at the stage where we can find out properties like porosity, permeability, water saturation, all those important attributes. But in the future, that's where we are headed. Right now, we see that we can obtain rock properties such as impedance and velocities. And in the future, we are going to move towards getting more rock attributes and then translating them into useful properties, porosity, permeability, water saturation, for example. And that's when I think the ultimate goal of full waveform inversion will be achieved.
At seg.org/podcast, you will find the show notes and links to special sections in interpretation and the leading edge. If you enjoy the show, review us on iTunes. Your reviews helps others find the show. Season 1 of Seismic Sound Off is sponsored by the SEG Wiki, home to hundreds of biographies of key geoscientists, geophysical tutorials, and core content from the science of applied geophysics. Visit wiki.seg.org to learn how you can grow the world's first online geophysics encyclopedia. Original music by Zach Bridges. This episode was produced by Isaac Farley and hosted, edited, and produced by me, Andrew Geary. Special thanks to Steve Brown, TLE Managing Editor, and Ted Bakamjian, Associate Executive Director of Knowledge Management. Thank you for listening. This is Seismic Sound Off, signaling off.